My name is Pedro Faria, and this webinar is hosted by Data Meaning. Today, we're going to be talking about Alteryx and FP&A. So, let's begin. Today's agenda is going to be just a little introduction of myself. We're going to be briefly talking about Alteryx in an overview, then FP&A. We're going to be presenting some use cases, as well as having some time at the end for some Q&A. Okay? Let me introduce myself. My name is Pedro Faria. If you want to find me on LinkedIn, this is my LinkedIn. If you want to contact me via email, this is my email hosted by Data Meaning. I am a professional service consultant and trainer over here at Data Meaning. I'm part of the Data Meaning enablement team. I specialize myself in best practices, automation, solution implementation, and training. In a high level, what I do is I provide enablement to clients by training, solution implementation, development of solutions, and just overall consulting, right? Answering questions or anything like that. I am certified with all Designer Core, Designer Advanced, Partner Certified, Alteryx Server Technical Certified, and Sales Certification for Alteryx Designer. Before Data Meaning, I was responsible for teaching Alteryx at the Big Four. I do come from a finance and accounting and retail background, so this is why today I'll be hosting the FP&A webinar for you guys. Okay? So let's do a brief overview of Alteryx so we are all aware of the tool if you are not. Some of you are familiar with Alteryx already, but others are not. So that's why we're going to be spending just a couple of minutes today explaining what Alteryx is, and then we're going to be jumping into more of a webinar regarding FP&A. Okay? So let's talk about Alteryx. What is Alteryx? Alteryx is an APA platform, an analytics process automation platform. Alteryx provides a couple of different solutions for you. One of them being the Alteryx Designer, which is a per user solution, which is hosted on your desktop, and also provides you with the Alteryx Server solution, which is a company-wide solution. So you can think of what? The Designer, the place where you're going to be preparing, manipulating your data, and the Server, the place where you have the ability of sharing, collaboration, and integration with the whole company setup that you have, just across all different departments at your company. Okay? Alteryx has many different use cases. We can mention them afterwards, but as I mentioned today, we're going to be focusing on FP&A. Okay? But a couple of things to understand when it comes to Alteryx. Alteryx will give you the ability of going directly into those raw data sets that you have, those raw data sources. So I'm talking about maybe just regular files, if you're talking about those, databases, the internet, for example, or any other third-party provider that you may have providing you data. So Alteryx will give you the ability to connect to all of those. So if you're talking about, for example, just regular Excel files, maybe you're talking about some Amazon databases, SQL Server, maybe just Salesforce, Oracle. Alteryx is data agnostic. It can connect to pretty much anything, any type of file. Additionally to this, if you want to connect to, for example, Twitter or any other provider that gives you an API access, guess what? Alteryx will also be the solution for this. You will have the ability of connecting via API as well. Alteryx, it is a user-friendly setup that you have. Okay, so everything, as I mentioned, is data agnostic. It is user-friendly, and it is both code-free and code-friendly. We're going to be talking about the code-free and the code-friendly part during our next session next week, but just know that Alteryx is both code-free and code-friendly. What I mean by this is, whenever we talk about manipulation of data, a lot of times we're talking about what? Maybe just SQL, maybe just some manipulation of data happening in Excel, for example, or maybe some manipulation of data happening with some kind of coding language, like Python, for example, right? Alteryx will give you the option of not needing to know any type of coding skill at all to be able to manipulate the data. Everything in Alteryx is about drop-down menus and everything like that. So checking and unchecking boxes, selecting, everything is already pre-built for you. So that's why Alteryx is code-free. However, if you do want to leverage programming languages inside of Alteryx, you should have the ability to do so as well. Okay? So Alteryx will give the ability of prepping and blending the data. If you want to work with geospatial data or enriching of data in general, Alteryx is going to give you the option of implementing data packages or as I mentioned before, making those API calls to your third-party provider with data, and then you have the ability of enriching your data, for example, with the census data, the experience data, the TomTom data, and the D&B data sets that Alteryx provide as a data package. Then we're talking about data prep, data blending, enriching your data. We're going to be then analyzing. This is the main focus of Alteryx. It gives you the option to focus only on analyzing data and forget about prepping and blending the data. And at the end, you have the ability of sharing everything, right? If you just want to share via the Alteryx gallery, which is hosted by the Alteryx server, as I mentioned, the company-wide solution, or if you want to output, for example, to a Tableau dashboard, a Power BI dashboard, a QuickSense dashboard, maybe some files, an Excel, CSV file, or maybe just back to your database, right? You should have the ability to do this with Alteryx at any point in time, okay? So if you have never seen Alteryx, this right here in the middle is a workflow, okay? Alteryx works with icons, so they call these tools or building blocks, depending on the documentation that you're seeing. So by connecting these tools right here, you start creating workflows, okay? So Alteryx works with workflows. Those tools, the combination of them, they become workflow. Alteryx, as I mentioned, it is a user-friendly setup that you can simply just drag and drop everything with no programming language required at all. You should have natively over 250 tools with more than 60 plus tools created for geospatial analysis, as well as R-based predictive model analysis data options like tools. So as I mentioned, Alteryx is data agnostic. So even though you're not seeing it in the background, you may have R or any type of coding language running those tools, okay? But at no point you have to go and look at that, only looking at the user interface of things, okay? Some use cases Alteryx can provide would be process automation, data analytics, regular ETL, right? So transforming, manipulating your data, geospatial analysis, and a lot more. Alteryx, data agnostic, as I mentioned. At the end of the day, the goal of Alteryx is to remove and replace any type of time that you spend creating data, manipulating data, to actually give you time back in the day for you to be more productive. So the user productivity goes from days to hours, okay? So in general, this is Alteryx, the concept of Alteryx, okay? So let's talk about Alteryx and FP&A, all right? So whenever we talk about ordinary FP&A activities, most of the time we're leveraging spreadsheets and other type of files. For example, a PDF, if you want to mention one example, text files, maybe just regular CSVs, spreadsheets in general, or free format data sets, okay? And an analyst can actually spend hours waiting and looking for the correct data, or actually sometimes waiting for the company's developers, so those DBA, those database developers, to perform the query they ask for. I said hours, right? But we all know that sometimes that can take days. Maybe a lot of people are asking something from a developer, so that he has a lot of queries to run, and those database access are limited to them only, right? So if an analyst needs something right now, maybe he's not going to receive that next week. Alteryx will provide you with a self-service analytics platform to empower any type of analyst. So it is self-service, right? So he has the ability of himself going there and extracting any type of data he may want to. Alteryx will not change the original data set, so that's not what Alteryx is doing. Alteryx manipulates data in memory. So it's just pulling the data in memory, so you're not really changing the original data set that you have, the original data source, unless, of course, you select Alteryx to replace that original data source. So you have to manually do that. So you should not worry about just testing things out with Alteryx. In general, Alteryx will give you the option of not needing to update the original data source unless you enable that too, okay? With the current setup that we have, we're not really empowering users with everything they can have if we think about it. Replacing literally an override reliance on spreadsheets and making it really difficult to connect to all the data connections that we have, multiple departments, multiple systems, to have at the end of the day, a full integration across the whole company. Alteryx will allow you to automate a lot of processes you have. Some cases, we may be thinking about maybe automating 100% of the process. Sometimes it can be up to, for example, 50%. But sometimes, think about it, if it's 50%, but those 50% that I just mentioned, mean, for example, 10 hours a month, do the calculation, right? How many hours can we be saving on a yearly basis for a single process, right? So automating those FP&A processes come in really handy, right? So we're not working anymore with just Excel and spreadsheets. We're now going towards automating everything. So at the end of the day, the goal is to automate any time-consuming manual task and have a self-service ability to just adjust any type of query that we may want to do so, right? Not needing anymore a Python programmer to run queries for us. Now we use the user-friendly interface of Alteryx to manipulate everything. So at the end of the day, we're going to be improving financial planning, forecasting, and the overall process of data manipulation for FP&A, right? So then we can deliver real-time and forward-thinking insights to the business. So this is a quote that I found a while ago that I think is really helpful for you to understand, right? Only 12% of the companies have access to the right data in a timely manner. So what I mean by this is, okay, maybe you have the right data, right? Maybe you're paying the right data providers, but how quickly does your analyst get the data that he needs in order to generate those insights for an analysis later on? An analyst should be able to devote their time to more strategic decisions and critical assessment of the results of the data set instead of trying to find the correct format, actually finding the data and manipulate the data, right? When FP&A teams, they have the freedom to devote their effort with more strategic tasks, they can actually better plan for the future growth, expenses, and investments, overall generating a long-term impact for the company, right? Just at the end of the day, it is all about raising the bottom line. So while FP&A can be a complicated, a complex process, gathering, prepping, and blending data, and at the end of the day, analyzing your data should not be. So when FP&A departments have the ability of leveraging something like Alteryx, the power of advanced analytics is put into their hands, managers and directors and analysts. So now they have the ability of leveraging Alteryx and, as I mentioned, at the end of the day, being more productive and giving you back your ROI. So what really happens when companies ignore data issues? The first thing that we mentioned is, of course, bad data quality. We could be talking about stale data or wrong data, right? As I mentioned, you may be paying your data provider a lot of money, and that's beautiful. He gives you access to live data, and the data is amazing. But does your analyst have access to the data? Can he see all the data? Does he have the ability of manipulating the data because he knows the business rules that he needs to apply in order to generate that report that will generate some insights? If he does, that's great. However, we all know that most of us would not have a setup like this in our company that will give the ability of our analysts, our managers, directors, or anyone else to have ability to go into live data and extract the live data, right? So with this, you have issues, either being stale. So sometimes you have access to the data and that is the correct data. However, that's not the data that is really impactful right now. Maybe that's a data later. So sometimes you may have issues with that as well. So if companies simply ignore data issues, they will at the end of the day have bad data quality, either by stale data or wrong data. And what does generate? Uninformed decision making, right? Maybe my analysis is to be performed with a month-old data set. However, if I'm talking about a 2-month data set, I may have issues, right? Because that's too old for my current analysis. So whatever I'm basing on is gonna give me the wrong indication of what I need to do. I may have this beautiful dashboard, like it's perfect. But at the end of the day, if your data is not giving you what you need the data to give you, you're gonna make uninformed decision making. you're gonna have a wrong understanding of the situation. So you right now may be thinking, does this ever happen to me? Think about it. How many times have you made a decision and it did not really generate anything, and you know that was a correct decision based upon what you saw? Sometimes it's because the data that you're working with, it is either wrong, not complete, or just full out wrong, or it is old data. So you're just making adjustments and decision making on either old or wrong data at the end of the day. And what does it do? It's going to be generating catastrophic end results. So I just spent a lot of money getting my data. I'm paying a lot of money for my developers. I'm paying a lot of money for my analysts. I'm doing a lot of different things. But if you're doing all of that and your ROI is not great, what happens? You're just wasting monetary resources, either being your data providers, maybe your staff, or maybe just yourself sometimes, if you think about it. Just wasting all your time and money if you do not have good quality data. So just lots of revenue, and of course, the bottom line will tank, right? So bad data leads to, at the end of the day, the bottom line tanking. So what do you need to be aware of and understand when it comes to Alteryx and FP&A, of course? Personas, the first one. With Alteryx, you can accommodate any type of personas. What I mean by personas is maybe your analyst, maybe your manager, maybe your data scientist, and everyone else, right? Just different types of personas. What I mean by this is then, you're gonna have the ability of giving your analyst the ability of working with data the way that he had never before. Maybe your director, maybe your manager, it's going to have the ability of running pre-built workflows to get the latest report. So now you're connecting to live data, you're creating those ad hoc reports, and then your manager has the latest available data to make decisions on. Or maybe your data scientist to run those more complex workflows. As I mentioned, Alteryx does not require data programming skills. However, if you do want to use those as well, Alteryx can accommodate that for your data scientists as an example, or use the code-free option to run the same thing they run with Python, with R, inside of Alteryx without needing to write any single line of code. You're going to be seeing that in just a little bit. So easy of use as well. You're going to empower the user to have access to what they could not have before. So now running queries was never so easy if you think about it, because Alteryx will provide you the user-friendly setup, and the user will have the ability of doing anything the data, even as I mentioned, predictive models. So if you do not know programming language, you may have issues running any type of forecast or predictive model. Alteryx will get rid of any of those issues, and then you have the ability of just selecting those pre-built models for you that will work for your data, if of course the model is the correct one for your data. Alteryx actually has machine learning as well that will tell you which model is the best to run with. So now, like, you have the right choice and you have the right model for your data. So think about it, and you know that that is something that to be considering. Okay, and that's going to be something that we're going to be covering during our next week. They're going to be talking about predictive models and machine learning using Alteryx without any type of coding skill. Okay, and most importantly, automation, right? The word kind of speaks for itself. At the end of the day, the goal is to automate what we can, spend less time developing and more time analyzing. So if you have any type of repetitive task, so maybe my month-end report, maybe my weekly report, or anything like that that I do on a timely basis that is repetitive, maybe even on an yearly basis if that just takes too long, right? We should be able to automate that. And as I mentioned, maybe it's 100%, maybe it's 80%, maybe it's 50%. Think about how many hours you'll be spending on a yearly basis with that automation. Talking about automation is beautiful, right? But the fact that we can eliminate human errors. So Alteryx will give you the setup to automate the process. And in that process, what you're gonna have the ability to do is to set that up in a way that you can simply eliminate any type of human errors. Okay, So you define the business rules, and then you eliminate the errors. And at the end of the day, you can go beyond what you think you can do for this, right? So simply doing everything that I just mentioned and more. Before, you could just run regular Excel manipulation. Now you can run SQL queries without needing to know SQL. You can run predictive models. You can do machine learning and a lot more. So now it's about going beyond what you think you can do. Okay? So this was it for when it comes to just FP&A itself. We're going to be now jumping into use cases, which is probably what you guys want to see right now, right? Just too much of talking. Now we can actually show Alteryx in general. Okay? So let's talk about use cases now. So one use case could be some type of inventory analysis. So what's the scenario? Maybe my manager wants to know of all the current inventory items that we have, which are not profitable. Or maybe I'm at year end, and then I need to do some kind of profitability inventory analysis, right? What I mean by this is this can be something that you know that's happening, or it can be an ad hoc request, right? So you need to be prepared to create those. But what is the issue? This type of analysis may require data from different departments. Maybe this is something that I'm not sure if the data that I received is the latest available data, right? Because I'm talking to a lot of different departments, what happens at the end of the day? Is that the data that I should receive? Is it something that happened a year ago, a month ago? I'm not sure. So is that the latest available data? And how long until I have access to everything that I need to from each department? So if I'm talking about a lot of different departments, then I need to make sure that I have the latest available data, as well as how long until I have that available for me, right? So it's not because I need or want to have the latest data that as soon as possible that I will get that, right? So it may take some time to get access to everything that you want. So why Alteryx in general? As I mentioned, Alteryx is going to give the ability of connecting to the live data. So now your analyst that needs to create either the schedule report or the ad hoc report will then have the ability of developing the workflow inside of Alteryx. Inside of Alteryx, you can create the workflow to, at any point, generate the ad hoc request, or Alteryx will give you the option of scheduling that specific report. So for example, if I need to run this on a monthly basis, you can schedule the report to run on a monthly basis. So connecting to the live connection. And because Alteryx is data agnostic, you have the ability of connecting to the whole data set and blending the whole data set. And of course, process automation is the end goal. So now we're going to be jumping on Alteryx. In a high level, this is the workflow that we're going to be presenting. So some type of inventory financial analysis. So you can think of this being an example of manipulating the data that we have in different ways. So if you have not seen Alteryx right here, this is Alteryx Designer, okay? So because some of you have not seen Alteryx before, let me introduce Alteryx Designer in just a couple seconds, and then we can jump into the workflow, okay? So this is Alteryx Designer, as I mentioned. It is a desktop drag and drop software. Right here in the middle, we have the canvas. So the canvas is a place where you can drag and drop all the tools, as I mentioned before. And they'll be stored right here at the top, at the tool palette. Okay, the tool palette, you can simply just drag them and drop them into the canvas. The configuration of each tool will happen right here on the left-hand side. So on the left-hand side, you will have the ability of seeing the actual configuration of each tool. So for example, what I'm doing right here is loading an Excel file. As you can see right here, a rental car XLS type of file. Okay, and then at the bottom is where we can actually see our data. So you can see right here that we have our data. Okay, so in general, this is the layout of Alteryx. You have the canvas where you're going to be drawing up the workflow. You have the tool palette at the top where you can store all the tools, as you can see right here at the top. As I scroll through them, you can see the configuration window on the left-hand side and the results right here at the bottom. Okay, So what is the goal of this specific workflow? Is that we need to connect to different data sources, different data sets. Those could be regular files, those could be regular databases, or anything in general. But the issue is that, do we have live access to those data sets? Do we know whether these data sets are the newest version of them? As well as automating the process, right? So for example, having a data set, for example, which is a car inventory data set, I can actually calculate my depreciation rate for each one of them. So Alteryx will allow me to automate the process, manipulate my data, and actually get to the endpoint of creating something that looks like a depreciation analysis for this. So if I go all the way right here to the end, you should be able to see that we're able to calculate accumulated depreciation and every type of depreciation that we may have. So current year and accounting depreciation and a lot more. So this right here is to show that we can automate the process, right? Something simple that you can do manually, but you can also attach that to the workflow in general that it is doing something else, for example. So maybe this is coming from a different department, right? So all the inventory that we have, but what about all the revenue that that one specific item generated, right? So maybe that's coming from a different department. So do I have access to the latest available data? Is that data correct? So what we can do is also connect to the data set. So now what we can see right here is all the values that we have for each sales. Then we can just, for example, calculate total per each item, as you can see right here. Or if we talk about expenses, for example, we can bring the data in as well and then calculate the total expense. So insurance and other type of costs that our specific item may have. So at the end of the day, what we're doing is blending everything into a single setup. And actually, at the end of the day, is figuring out exactly what is profitable and what is not. So I can see that out of all my items, pretty much 700 of them were profitable, and then 300 of them were not profitable. And you can see right here, my profit and loss analysis. So what is happening here is that we're connecting to a lot of different departments. We're extracting the raw data. We are manipulating, preparing, and blending the raw data. And then we're getting to the result where we can see everything, whether it's profitable or not. And by building this workflow, you can run this. And then if you look right here at the bottom, you can see that we ran this under 4 seconds. So you can think of, if I have some kind of ad hoc request to create something like this, I can develop it. Or if I have something already pre-built, I can develop everything and then run everything under 4 seconds. So this is a great example of how you can automate a process, maybe a simple process, but now next time they need to do this, instead of maybe taking you a couple hours, maybe even more, depending on how long it takes you to get access to the data. Because if you guys remember, it's not about just having everything in front of you and doing it. Sometimes it's about waiting for the one data set that you need to arrive at your computer, at your desk. Okay, so this is a quick and simple example of some type of profitable analysis, in this case with inventory financial analysis, to generate profitable items. And now I have my insight of what should remain under our inventory and what should be brought up into discussions of maybe we need to eliminate them, right? So for example, I can see if I sort this, I can see my most profitable and my least profitable file. So I can see right here that this specific inventory item is my least profitable. So I'm not really generating any revenue with it. I'm just having a lot of maintenance and all the type of expenses. In comparison to right here, the first one maybe is something that just lost money this year, right? So I can always go back to last year's and figure that out based upon my analysis, right? So in a high level, this is the first workflow, connecting to live data, manipulating the live data, and then being able to fully integrate Alteryx to automate the process. So our next inventory, our next use case can be what? Just-in-time inventory. So what's the scenario? Maybe we have a daily or weekly task that we need to provide procurement team with the materials needed for the purchase to fulfill all the sales order that we have using the just-in-time inventory. Okay, So I need to provide the responsible for each department all the information they need to purchase new materials. Whenever we are operating with a different setup, for example, the just-in-time inventory method, it actually requires us agile methods to clean up everything, right? To make sure that everything is readily available. So what is the problem? The problem is that we have a repetitive method of accounting and a process that requires a lot of specific method calculations. This method requires flexibility and a specific business rule applied to this. So now we're talking about applying your business rules to your analysis, right? To make sure that this is custom made for your setup that you have, right? So at the end of the day, do I have the setup? Or even more, can I predict what's going to be needed in 2 weeks from now? How about a month? How about 2 months? So with this, Alteryx, as we're going to be talking about in just a little bit as well, will give the ability of creating those additional calculations, okay? So why Alteryx? Alteryx will give you the option of automating that process. It's going to give you the option of automatically sending, for example, emails to your procurement team to get the purchase order report you need for the raw materials. And of course, as I mentioned, defining your business rules. You have the ability of automating the whole process and at the same time, even automate delivering that analysis. As I mentioned, you should be able to connect your email, for example, to Alteryx, and then you can send those automatic emails. So you can think of, maybe I have this one report that I run on a weekly basis, and every single Friday at 6 p.m., or maybe every single Monday at 9 a.m., my manager or a lot of different managers or a lot of different people need to receive that one report with the updated data set. So now we have talked about connecting to live data, and now we're talking about automating the process even further, right? Having the ability of sending those automatic emails to the people that are supposed to receive them. So pretty much almost like creating a little bot, right? If you want to call it that way. Then of course, you connect your email, you automate the sending of the email to the people that should receive that report, right? So let's then jump into the workflow and show you right here. And again, it's about what? Connecting to a lot of different data sources. If we're doing, for example, a just-in-time manufacturing setup, we know that there are a lot of different data sources that we need to connect to in order to make sure what? That our sales are what we expect, our raw materials are set up, everything that's being produced right here is being accounted for, as well as if you want to add more information to it, for example, as well, get all the supplier information with it. So what I can do is connect all my data sets as I click on them. Right here on the bottom, you can see them. And have the live connection to the data that I need to create the connection to. So as I mentioned, those could be files, databases, or anything like that. It really depends on how your company is operating. So what I can do afterwards is manipulate the data as best as I can to get everything in the format that I need that to be. So now I've done all my business rules calculations. So I know that, for example, I'm talking about a week of producing, right? So I need to make sure that I have all my materials ready and available for me within a week. So what do I need to do? Check. Do I have this for my inventory? Do I have that? Do I have the raw materials? If no, how long and how much do I have to spend to get the one raw item that I need over here within a couple of days? So you can create all those calculations, integrate all those business rules inside of Alteryx. You can make that dynamic. Alteryx will let you know, of course, if you create something like this, how much you're going to be spending, if that's appropriate. Maybe, for example, you have a budget, right? And then you want to run through and then see, okay, what is the best option that at the end of the day, I have the most optimal setup, but staying within my budget, right? Because saying that, okay, maybe it cost me $100 to get me all the raw materials at the time that I need. However, let's say that my budget was only $50, right? How can I make sure that everything that I need to do can be accommodated, or at least most of it can be accommodated within my budget? Alteryx has something called the optimization setup. they can run through a lot of different options, automatic calculation of options, to see if any scenario would fit your need, right? So as I mentioned, from this point on, you will be leveraging something that before you had no idea how to do it before, besides doing manually, right? So just running all those different models without any type of programming skill at all. We're going to be talking about, as I mentioned, just a little bit, as well as diving deeper into models and machine learning afterwards during our next session next week, right? So now I have the ability of figuring exactly how much everything should cost, when I should receive that, and how much of it I should actually purchase. So additional to this, as I mentioned, if I want to add the supplier information to it and everything else, what I can do now is, if I want to output this to just a file, for example, I can just open the file and actually have the ability of, for example, visualizing data that I just calculated. As you can see, I can actually, of course, open as an Excel file, of course. In this case, I just selected a PDF option. However, if I want to automate this even further, what I can do is connect my email information right here, and I can send automatic emails. If you look right here at the bottom, I sent one email using Alteryx. So what I did is I saved this file, the PDF file that I just showed you, and then I sent this automatically to the people that were supposed to receive this. So this way, I have my whole setup automated, okay? So now let's go back to Alteryx. Sorry, let's go back to the PowerPoint. And let's talk about something that's a little bit more complicated, but now we're getting deeper into what Alteryx can do for you instead of just automation, right? So what's the scenario? Maybe we are at year end or quarter end, and we must produce some kind of sales forecast for next period, right? Maybe we're just building a budget, and then we need the forecast of sales. Or maybe you just need to create some kind of ad hoc forecast for some kind of specific reason. I mean, COVID could be one of them, right? Or we're under like sales, like Christmas season, right? We're just providing a lot of sales, like Black Friday, everything like that. So what's the problem? The problem is that we may have limited technical resources to accomplish this. Why is that? Maybe the person that was supposed to actually do this for me, I mean, maybe he quit, right? Maybe my analyst will just quit, my data scientist quit, or maybe they're just busy. I'm just short-staffed, right? Something may happen that I have limited resources for me to build out the financial forecast. Of course, you can say, Josh, go recreate that using Excel. I mean, he can try, but does he have the necessary skills to do so using Excel? Or even if he did, for example, if he kind of knew how to get some kind of financial forecasting going, is, for example, Excel something that he can leverage all the data with? We all know that Excel crashes every now and then whenever we're talking about a lot of data. So maybe if he does have the skills, maybe he does not have the resources. And if he does have the resources, maybe he also does not have the skills. So you get that this is just going in cycle, right? So it is a problem. It is a problem that what? You're too dependent on the people that know how to do this, your data scientist person. So why is Alteryx a solution? We live in a code-free environment. And then, for example, you can use either the ARIMA or the ETS models. So those are two financial forecasting models that already are pre-built and validated by Alteryx. So you know that whatever you're running over there is something that makes sense. Additional to this, you have the ability of comparing both models, and then you can see which one gives you the best results. So of course, you can set up your logic, you can test and validate everything, your model, in seconds. So instead of waiting weeks, or maybe days, or maybe months, for your data scientist to be able to develop something, you can just go there, test and validate, create, test and validate your models in seconds. And of course, you can leverage as much historical data as you may want to do so. Okay, so let's then talk about the model inside of Alteryx. As I mentioned, Alteryx will give the option of manipulating everything inside of Alteryx in the way that you had not had the option before. So for example, I can input all my data sets, and manipulate it. So in this case, what I have right here is a data set that contains historical data that goes all the way back to 1990, so January 1990, okay? So if I needed to run my historical data, you can have the option of running for like financial forecasting methods, data that goes like on a weekly basis, daily, hourly, monthly, yearly, just depends on how your data is set up. Okay, so maybe instead of having just 1,000 rows, if you're talking about, for example, days or months or weeks, you could need to have, for example, 1 million of rows, because maybe we're talking about on an hourly basis, right? So this really depends on how your data is set up. And at some point, either you do not have the skill to develop that manually, or you don't have the resources. So the software resources that, for example, Alteryx can give you. Alteryx does not have issues manipulating any type of data when it comes to type itself as well as size. So you should have the ability of loading all of that into Alteryx. Alteryx will support as much data as your computer can handle, because Alteryx manipulates data in memory. However, if you do want to manipulate data using, for example, your database memory, Alteryx will offer you the in-database options right here as well. So instead of bringing the data in memory, the data stays in the database and just manipulates everything. But just to also be clear, Alteryx just going from database to Alteryx Designer. The data is not going anywhere, so there's no type of issues when it comes to data governance, okay? It's never leaving your environment, all right? So in this case, I have input in my data set. And now what I'm doing right here is actually checking to see which model I like to prefer to go with. So now I have my ARMA at the top and my ETS model at the bottom. Okay, so right now I'm clicking on the ARMA. All I'm doing is selecting that I want to run a monthly analysis. And then that's going to be on a 12-week period basis. So I'm going to be predicting the next 12 months. Okay, and I'm doing the same thing with the ETS model. As you can see, same setup. And the same setup, 12 months. If I want to further customize this, I can, okay? But in this case, I do not need to. So then what I'm doing is comparing both models and seeing which one of them is going to give me the least mean error, right? So you can see right here that RMR right here gives me sometimes the least error or not. Just really depends on which model you prefer to go with. So based upon that analysis that you can perform, so which one's going to give you the least mean error for you? So based upon either like the average or the absolute values, you can check to see if Alteryx is a possible solution. You can actually use also the report right here and visualize a comparison between the actual and what ARMA and ETS forecasted, as well as some information right here at the bottom in a little interactive dashboard right here as well. So you just have the ability of looking at the data and visualizing that as well in a different way, just to compare both models and how they rank, okay? But after picking the model that you think is best for you, for example, the ARMA model, I can run the workflow to account for that. I can then get the information that was forecasted, as you can see right here. It gives you a high 95 confidence level, 80% confidence level, as well as high and low, right? Then it's going to give you the average and then create a forecast. So you can either go with the forecast that Alteryx gives you, or for example, if you think that you have a better way of analyzing the data that was forecasted, for example, if I want to create a weighted average, I can, for example, create a weighted average right here, just showing that you can either go with Alteryx gives you, or you can use the base of Alteryx gave you and apply the one forecast to it. And then at the end, for example, we can check, we can compare the actual forecast with what the actual sales were, for example. And then at the end, we can see that the comparison between them, we can see that the average error was literally more less than 0%, as well as the sum of all the difference between when we're comparing the actual with the forecasted. Okay? So this way, you can see they have the ability of simply working financial forecasting methods using Alteryx Designer in a way that you never had the option before whenever you're dealing with asking your data scientist or just not doing anything or even getting outside resources to build all those models for you. You can use Alteryx financial forecasting methods right here at the top to build those models out for you. Okay. And then lastly, what I want to talk about is financial reporting, which is something sometimes it is super helpful. So what's the scenario? Maybe we are a month or year end and we must produce our financial statement table, all right? Or maybe we just need some kind of ad hoc financial statement table, right? Maybe my income statement, maybe my balance sheet, or any type of other reporting table that we may want to produce. So what's the problem? We all know that whenever generating those tables, we may go and then spend like different versions on it. So just always creating version 1, version 2, version 3, or version 4, on and on, right? To get the latest tables that we need to use for the final version. We need to have this readily available after any type of adjustment, right? So if there are any last minute adjustments, we need to go back. If we're doing, for example, Excel, we need to go back and manually change that and make sure that every number is combined and everything makes sense, right? And also, are all the accounting rules being correctly applied? So as I mentioned in Alteryx, you can define your business rules, and then at the end of the day, you have the ability of just applying those rules and make sure that you have no human errors. So why Alteryx? Automate the process, eliminate human errors, rounding issues, or any type of accounting classification issues. And of course, you have your readily available financial statement items for you. Okay? So for example, we can now jump into the workflow, and it's going to be the last workflow that we have. What we have here is a data set connecting to a database. So in this case is a MySQL database, but you can think of your database, your software. That has my trial balance as well as my table mapping. So what's an asset, what's a liability, what's the current asset, on and on, right? So for example, I can just scroll all the way forward. I can visualize that in this case, what I'm doing is building out an income statement using right here, Alteryx. Of course, if I just want to create that, I can simply, from this point on, output this as a regular Excel file. However, if I want to apply some kind of formatting, giving this a better visual, right? Because in this case, if I were to output this to just an Excel file, you just see like a regular Excel file, right? No type of formatting, nothing like this. However, in this case, we can use Alteryx reporting capabilities to start producing our financial statement item, our table, for example. So in a step-by-step process, we start creating all the accounts, highlighting everything, making everything bold, as well as all the numbers, prior year, current year. If we're dealing with the actual financial statement, we may have notes. We start actually producing and gathering everything, arranging everything together, and start looking at something that looks a lot similar to a financial statement item, right? So step-by-step producing what we need to do so. And at the end, we have something that looks like a financial statement table. So for example, if I were to open the PDF output, you can see that we can start producing some type of reporting that looks like a financial statement item, right? Now, of course, this is just a generic version. You have a lot more that you can leverage, and then you have a lot more that you can create with it. This is just one quick example of how you can do that. And of course, I created this, but how long did it take me to run this? Under 3 seconds, actually under 4 seconds. So if any changes were to be made, I can simply click the run button again, and I can automate the process. So it's gonna take literally, again, 3 seconds to run through everything and make any type of adjustment. Okay? So this is how we can leverage Alteryx Designer for both process automation, business rules application, financial forecasting, right? So going beyond what you know, and complicated use case production like financial statement items or data reporting in general. Okay? So this was it for today. I do appreciate your time today. As I mentioned, next week, we're going to be having a new FP&A section that we're going to be diving deeper into PDF analysis, for example, K1 analysis, or just in general reading PDF files, financial forecasting, and a couple other examples as well. So I hope that you guys liked today. I hope that you guys join me tomorrow, next week for our second session. As I mentioned before, thank you guys for today. I hope that I see you guys next week.
If you have any questions or suggestions for future videos, please comment down below. Don't forget to subscribe to know when future videos are posted. Thank you for watching.